Hello everyone. This is Agile Leaders episode number 11. Sorry. Today our guest is Roman Pichler from London, I guess. So welcome to Agile Leaders, Roman.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to having you at our Agile Leaders event series. So can you please tell us about your briefly about your background? What are you doing right now?
Yes, so the two aspects to my work. The first one is that I work with product managers and product owners. I teach and coach and mentor people who look after products, and I help my clients establish an effective product management organization. So that's one part of my job. The other part of my job is to run a small business based just outside London. And as part of that second aspect, I try and practice what I preach as much as I can, and be a product manager for the products and the services that we offer. Keep my teaching and my practice fresh, and experiment with new ideas.
Great. So as you know, today our topic is product roadmaps. In specific, we will talk about the details of the agile product roadmaps. What's a roadmap? How can we use these roadmaps in the agile processes and methodologies? So I would like to start with the very basic question: what's a product roadmap?
Yes, what's a product roadmap? In my mind, a product roadmap is a high-level strategic plan that describes how a product is likely to grow, how it is likely to evolve across multiple major releases. So, maybe an analogy helps to explain what a product roadmap can do. Let's say we'd like to spend a nice holiday in the south of France, maybe at the French Riviera. And let's say that we've decided to drive there. Now, if you live like me, just outside London, then the question is, how do we get there? Which route should we choose? Should we take the ferry or the train to cross the channel? Should we stop over? What are the stopover points along the way if we want to have any stops? Should we maybe stay overnight? So for me, that'd be something, I do when I plan a holiday. Certainly, with 3 kids in the back of the car, I wouldn't just set off and trust my sat-nav to, deliver me, using the perfect route, to southern France. So it's literally just like you plan a car journey, a road trip, that you think about what is the journey you'd like to take your product on, what are major milestones, what are major releases, what are product versions that you can anticipate over the next 6, 12, 18, in some cases, maybe 24 months. So yeah, that in a nutshell is a product roadmap. And in its simplest format, it essentially maps those major releases, those product versions, onto a timeline.
Oh, great. So why, in your perspective, why do we need these product roadmaps?
So yes, interesting question, and maybe particularly relevant in an agile context. Traditional agile models or frameworks such as Scrum don't really recognize a product roadmap as a formal artifact, which doesn't mean that it isn't helpful and we shouldn't use it. So the benefit of using a product roadmap for me is that it creates a continuity of purpose. It looks beyond the next release and it connects major releases. I find it a fantastic stakeholder collaboration and management tool. I find that it provides a great opportunity to make prioritization decisions at the right level, to communicate to management how the product is likely to evolve and develop, and to acquire some funding. So yes, I mean, I quite like to use product roadmaps, as you can hear.
Yeah, thank you for your answer about this. Actually, I have experienced the producing the product roadmaps to my clients in the past. I think I don't know which mistakes that I've done previously, but I think you have experienced a lot about the mistakes that people doing while producing or managing the product backlogs. For example, if you can give us some examples of some mistakes that can people do during producing and managing product backlogs.
Product roadmaps or product backlogs?
Oh, sorry, roadmaps. I just confused when you said Scrum. Yeah, product roadmaps. Yeah,
that's all right. No worries. Yeah. So the first mistake in my mind is not to have something like an overarching strategy. So, you know, going back to the little example about planning a road trip, if you're not clear on your destination, where you want to spend the holiday, and if you don't understand how to get to your holiday destination, if you drive, if you take the train, if you fly, if you're maybe more ambitious and you cycle, you may even decide to walk, who knows, then it's very difficult to decide what the right route is and what the right milestones are, you know, what the key points along the journey are. So, you know, I think that the first thing to be aware of is that you should have a valid or validated product strategy. So you should know what is the value proposition of your product, what is the main problem that it solves or the major benefit it provides, who are the customers and the users, which segment or which market does the product address, and what are the key features that make it attractive and that make it stand out, and what are the business goals and maybe the key performance indicators, key KPIs, so you can track and see, understand how your product is doing. So, you know, that's for me an important prerequisite. Another thing to watch out for, particularly in an agile context where we assume that there is change and uncertainty that we can't necessarily fully anticipate, is to avoid that you work with a feature-heavy, feature-loaded roadmap. So the most common roadmap format that I've encountered are feature-based roadmaps. And a feature-based roadmap, you know, put simply, maps a set of features onto a timeline. So you'd say like, all right, we'll do a release in 3 months' time, and oh, you know, we'd like to improve reporting, and we'd like to add, I don't know, a login feature, and we'd like to do this feature and that feature and this feature. Now, that's okay if your product is mature and stable, and if the market doesn't change unexpectedly. But otherwise, I find it's more beneficial to work with a goal-oriented or benefits-based roadmap. So a roadmap that first and foremost talks about what are the goals that you'd like to achieve, and what are the benefits that the product should deliver for each major release, right? So, you know, those could be things around acquiring customers and users, increasing engagement or retention, reducing cost, increasing revenue, starting to earn some money, or other goals. You know, maybe something around reducing the technical debt to make it easier and more effective to evolve the product and add new shiny features. And then so in that context, you would still add a few high level, maybe 3, maybe 4, in some cases 5 high level coarse-grained features, but they're second-class citizens and they're derived from the goals. So the goals come first, and the features then serve the goals, help reach the goals. And they're a little bit like deliverables, right? The things that you need to put in place in order to acquire users or increase retention. So that'd be my suggestion, to work with a goal-oriented roadmap instead of a feature-based one, and use features sparsely and keep them high level. I personally think that generally speaking, in an agile setting, it's probably not such a good idea to list epics and user stories on your product roadmap. Those kind of artifacts are important, but they belong in the product backlog. You know, so keep the product roadmap at a strategic level. You know, keep it at a more coarse-grained level. You know, make it high level. So and I guess the last thing to be aware of is that a product roadmap is a plan. It's not a guarantee, and it's not a commitment as such. I mean, it's great if you're committed to your product, but your plan is not necessarily going to come true. Things can change, and so you should expect that your roadmap changes, and review your roadmap on a regular basis, and then change and adapt it. So, that's a mistake that sometimes management makes, sometimes stakeholders make, that they think, okay, because we've written it down, it is definitely going to happen. Well, hopefully it's going to happen, but it may not.
Yeah, thank you. I have a particular question about the roadmaps. If I'm not understanding you wrongly, you said that the roadmaps should be on the strategic level. So it should define the major releases on the road of this product life cycle, right?
Mm-hmm. So yes, the roadmap is influenced by the product life cycle. The product life cycle model suggests that there are different stages your product has to go through, and that each stage has its own objectives. Mm-hmm. The objective of the introduction stage is to get to product market fit, is to build an initial user community, learn about how people use the product in the target environment, get some feedback, get some early testimonials, and then adapt your product, get it ready for the mainstream market, for instance. And that will influence your roadmap. I mean, that will then suggest the appropriate goals. So if your product is in introduction at the moment, then you probably want to acquire customers and users, and you want to retain them. Those would be two sample goals that are likely to be relevant. And so each phase of the product life cycle provides a context for choosing the right goals on your roadmap and for getting your roadmap right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great. So for the agile teams, as you mentioned earlier, roadmaps are not a formal artifact of the agile methods like Scrum, for example. So agile teams has to maintain another artifact which is called roadmap. If they use this as an artifact on their methodology, is it easy to maintain such roadmaps?
So you're talking about the relationship between the product roadmap and the product backlog?
Actually, this question will be later, but yes, we can talk about this too.
Okay, so if it's about maintaining and updating roadmaps, is that the question?
Yeah.
Good. Yes. So my rule of thumb that I like to suggest is to review and update the product roadmap at least on a quarterly basis. And that depends or is influenced again by the life cycle stage of your product. If you're an introduction and you've just recently launched, then you may want to review the product roadmap together with the product strategy more frequently, maybe even on a monthly basis. You could even do it as part of the sprint review meeting, as you have all the key stakeholders there. So review your product roadmap on a regular basis and adjust it. That'd be the first recommendation. And the second recommendation would be to do it together with the right people and involve the key stakeholders. So for a commercial product, those are representatives from marketing and sales, customer support, development, but you may want to involve people from other business units, including finance and legal, depending on who has to contribute. And so a collaborative road mapping approach and using a road mapping workshop has the benefit that you're likely to build a strong buy-in, and you're likely to create more transparency. The stakeholders hear each other's concerns, each other's ideas, each other's requests, and And hopefully, you'll be able to leverage their ideas and creativity and build a great or an even better product roadmap than if you did it on your own, or if you went from stakeholder to stakeholder, trying to broker a deal between them. And I guess that's the thing to be aware of, right? If you have, if you employ a product roadmap workshop, then make sure that, as the product manager or product owner, you don't get pushed around. So, you have to know where you want to take your product. You have to have a vision of how you think your product should evolve. And you should not shy away from communicating that and trying to, influence. I think it's great to come to an agreement, but, consensus is not always possible. And in that case, I think you shouldn't shy away from making a decision, even if, it's a tough one, and, even if that means saying no.
Yeah. So I'm wondering that actually I know your tools that you produced that you published freely to people that who should want to use. So I would like to ask you that and which information does an agile product roadmap provide to the team, provide to the stakeholders? I mean the structure of a good roadmap.
So the number of elements that I would suggest you consider including in a roadmap that is intended to be used in an agile business context where things change frequently and unexpectedly. So the first one and most important element really is a goal or benefit for each major release. So think about when, or at least in which order, major releases are likely to happen. That means you have to select a time frame or a date, or at least a sequence, and then determine what the goal is for each of those major releases. So those are two key elements. A third key element will be to consider how you know that you've achieved those goals. And so I like to include metrics in the product roadmap to allow me to track and measure if a benefit has been realized, if a goal has been met. And the fourth element, I would suggest are the features. And the features, I mentioned that briefly earlier, should be derived from the goals. The question should be, in order to achieve those goals, what are the things that we have to deliver? What are the features that we have to implement? And keep them coarse-grained, keep them high level, and focus on the 3 to 5 key features for each major release. The details are then in the product backlog. So the point of the product roadmap is not to describe how your product is likely to grow in a comprehensive and complete manner and add lots of details. Otherwise, it's no longer a strategic plan. Otherwise, you're likely to be lost in the details, and you're better off just looking at your product backlog. So those are 4 key elements, and with the specific roadmap format that I've suggested, I've added a 5th one, which is simply the name of each release, which probably not that exciting.
I have 2 questions about the elements of the roadmap. First one is about the features. Can we count the epics as the features that we count as the that we can put on the roadmaps?
Yeah, good question. So feature is a very ambiguous term, and different people have different ideas what a feature is. So I equate features with product capabilities or themes, so groups of epics. So they're more higher level, they're more coarse-grained than epics. So a feature for me would be something like reporting or user login. So something where you typically need more than one epic in order to describe the feature and really capture what it's about. So that they're more really very high level headlines, you could say. And the reason that I like to suggest to keep the features in a roadmap, in an agile roadmap at this level is, it's easier to agree on the goals and the deliverables if you don't dive too much into the details. B, it then gives the agile teams the necessary freedom to inspect and adapt, to experiment and find out, how those features should be delivered in the best possible way, and you don't anticipate that or prescribe that in your roadmap. And third, if your roadmap contains too many detailed features, it's likely to be outdated fairly quickly. And I mentioned earlier that the product roadmap, has the key benefit of being a hopefully shared and agreed plan that, is helpful for the stakeholders, helps with stakeholder collaboration and management. Now, if you create a new roadmap or update a roadmap and a week or 2 weeks later, it's utterly outdated, and that happens again and again, well, people are likely to lose trust in the product roadmap as a planning and alignment tool, and they may lose trust in your planning abilities. So by keeping the roadmap a little bit sketchy and high level, you minimize the risk that it changes too frequently and it becomes outdated too quickly.
Thank you. My second question is about to measure our success, to meet our goal and benefit for the major release. You said that there is an element to measure the success of our release on the roadmap item, let's say, and I think this success measurement is we can only know that if we are successful or not on the next release.
Yes,
am I correct?
That's right. Yes, I mean that's often the case, that if you have a specific, say, acquisition target and you want to acquire a certain number or increase your user base or customer base by a certain percentage or by a range, then you probably won't be able to measure that before you've released, and it may take a little while. It may take days or weeks in some cases until you see if you're actually hitting your target. And if you're actually meeting your goal. That's right, yes. I nevertheless think it's important to have product-specific or release-specific A goals and B metrics, so you can measure the progress. So there's, for me, I don't want to make this too complicated, but I quite like to work with a three-tiered goals and metrics approach. So I like to work with, in a way, business goals that a product has, and these business goals are really the primary reason, the main reason for the company to invest in the product, and that could be to generate revenue, it could be to sell another product or service, it could be to reduce costs, it could be to enhance the brand, it could be to acquire key knowledge, or combination. And I like to measure those key business goals with KPIs, key performance indicators. But then as you do the road mapping exercise, and as you think about how is the product likely to evolve, I think it's kind of nice then to break it down, make it more specific, and say, okay, what are the goals, for the next, 12 months or so, and maybe you have a major release every 6 weeks, maybe you have a major release every 2 or 3 months. So what are the goals of those major releases? And again, how can you measure them? How can you find out if ultimately you've met those goals? And ideally, the business goals will provide a context for choosing the right product goals, just like the life cycle stage should help you. And ideally, the metrics on your roadmap also then line up and help you understand, what the business impact is that your product really achieves. And then the third tier that I like to work with is the sprint goals, which for me are operational goals, and where I also have suggested to formulate some success criteria or some metrics, so that as the product owner, product manager, you know if not only if work has been done, right? I mean that's useful to track project progress, which also helps you to understand if your product roadmap is realistic or not. But that's good, but it's not enough. I think it's also important to say, how can we measure the success of the sprint, and how do we know that the goal has been met? And the goal could be to acquire knowledge, or to maybe complete or optimize a feature.
Okay, thank you very much for the information that you provide us. Actually, I know that you have a tool that people can use. Go product roadmap, I guess. If you'd like to talk a little bit about this tool, it would be great.
Yes, yeah. So it's a little template. It's just a little template that
Yeah.
leverages the idea of building a roadmap that is primarily based on goals. Hence the name, goal-oriented roadmap. So if that's something people would like to explore, if you watch this, you listen to it, and think about, well, maybe I should try out goal-oriented roadmaps, then you can download the template from my website. It's just a very simple template, and the point is not filling it out. The point is really reflecting on the key elements. And as I said, in an agile context, I've found it beneficial to first and foremost focus on those goals and try and create shared goals by involving the stakeholders, or maybe even better, collaborating with them.
Great. So actually, we mentioned a little bit about it, but I would like to hear that what's the difference or what is the connection between the roadmaps and the product backlogs?
Mm-hmm. Yes, very good question, particularly, I guess, for those people that use product backlogs and apply Scrum. So for me, the two things, the two artifacts, the two tools, if you want so, go nicely together if you set them up in the right way. So they complement each other. And as I've tried to describe a little bit earlier, the product roadmap is a high-level strategic plan that covers multiple releases, maybe looks out for the next 12 months or so, whereas the product backlog contains the details that are necessary, the necessary details to develop a product. So things like user stories and epics, maybe non-functional requirements, or scenarios or interaction diagrams. Your product backlog could be a story map. So those are all tremendously valuable pieces of information, artifacts that are captured in a product backlog, but they're very much focused on the more technical operational level. What needs to be done to now build this product? And creating a successful digital product requires a lot of attention to the details. But if we just focus on the details, well, then I don't think, then it's a little bit like purely blindly trusting your sat nav, your satellite navigation system to get you to southern France, and while a sat nav is probably capable of doing it, it may take you on some interesting little detours along the way. I mean, I've had some pretty bad experiences blindly trusting my sat nav, and so I find if you just purely look at the tactical level, you're not looking far ahead, and it's also difficult to agree at that level with the stakeholders about what to do and what not to do. So for me, by having a product roadmap that complements the product backlog, you actually make your product backlog management work easier. You can work with a more focused, a shorter, simpler product backlog, which you can derive from the product roadmap, and you can even focus it exclusively on the next major release, right? So that makes it then easier to update the backlog and reduces the management overhead that you have, and hopefully increases the transparency and clarity around it. So yes, I mean, for me, as I said, the two things go together, and Scrum is just such a simple and focused and nice development framework that you can't expect, particularly not from a product management, product owner perspective, that it provides all the necessary tools. I mean, I don't think that was ever the goal, the purpose of Scrum, the intention. So I think in order to make it work from a product perspective, it's good to add artifacts where it makes sense and use additional tools as appropriate.
Okay. As you know, in the Scrum framework, product backlogs are owned by the product owners. So if we use the Agile product roadmap or roadmaps, who should own this artifact in the team?
So For me, if you use a product owner, then it should be the product owner who owns the product roadmap and the product strategy. And some people have called that notion of a product owner the big product owner, a product owner who has a vision, but as I said, owns the product strategy and roadmap and the product backlog. Now, if you split product ownership and you work with a chief product owner or a product manager and a product owner who's then more focused on the tactical work and owns the product backlog, then the chief product owner or product manager would own the product strategy and the product roadmap. And that can sometimes work and it can sometimes make sense. Just the thing to be aware of is that the product roadmap and the product backlog influence each other. And as you build product increments, you understand if you're progressing fast enough and if you can actually meet your release goals that you've laid out on the product roadmap. And you also generate new ideas which you may want to integrate into the roadmap. So it's not just that the roadmap influences the backlog also influences the roadmap and therefore the strategy. So if you have two people owning, one individual owning the backlog, another individual owning the roadmap, just make sure that those two people work closely together, that they get on well, and that there aren't any misunderstandings and issues around updating both artifacts and keeping them in sync.
So how does the product owners feel about product roadmaps? I mean, you are giving another responsibility to that person to manage some artifacts, and he or she should arrange some meetings to invite the other stakeholders to work on this new artifact, and he or she should manage this. Do you have any real life feedbacks? How do product owners feel about it? Are they happy to? As you explained us, it's a very useful tool. I'm personally use the product roadmaps too in the teams. But how does the other product owners can feel about it?
So I think it very much depends on how the product owner role is applied in an organization, in a company, and it depends on the individual's background. So I've met product owners who were very happy to take on road mapping responsibilities, and I've met product owners who were very wary of creating a roadmap, partly because they lacked the knowledge and the skills to do so, but partly because the way the role was applied is, well, that the product owner really worked with the product backlog and focused on the tactical aspects of the product. So I think that's just something to be in mind and to be honest about. So if you work as a product owner, I'd say generally it is desirable that you know at least a little bit about product road mapping, so that you can attend the road mapping session and be an active contributor to a product roadmap, even if someone else owns it. And in my opinion, ideally, a product owner should own the strategic and the tactical aspects of a product. Mm-hmm. And so in that case, you should actually then own the roadmap, and you should be able to create it with the help of the input of the stakeholders.
Great. So this will be my last question. As you know, nowadays and Agile and Scrum at scale is a very popular topic in the Agile world. And if we scaled our Scrum teams all over in an organization like a bank's IT department or telecommunication companies like IT department, this is a huge organization. And let's say we have 30, 40 teams working on the different products, and they have some dependencies. So if we use product roadmaps, this will also be, there will be also another dependency on the product roadmaps. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? About this issue, or do you have any best practices to manage such dependencies?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I turn it around and I'd say, for me, it's another benefit that product roadmaps hopefully help you to identify and manage dependencies and make them explicit between different products. So, if you have products that belong to the same product family that are related, then, as I said, roadmaps should help you to identify what which product needs from another product, or what the product needs from each other, what they need from each other, and if you want to synchronize major releases, or if you want to stagger them and avoid that all the products release at the same point in time. But generally, in an agile context, my suggestion is to try and minimize the dependencies that you have. If you have a lot of dependencies, then that's usually that usually means that you can't move fast. You can't try things out quickly. You can't experiment. You can't learn fast, and you're not very responsive. So ultimately, you're not very agile. So the first question for me is really, why are there dependencies, and what would it take to reduce those dependencies, to break some of those dependencies, and what is the cost? So you can do a cost-benefit analysis. And a common reason that I've encountered in my work is that as digital products grow, become bigger, attract more features, well, their code base also grows, and the code is not always the most the nicest and the cleanest. And so sometimes it's really about investing in architecture refactoring and sorting out some of the spaghetti code that you have. And sometimes it's also about making the right strategic product management decisions, how you want to take your product forward. And if for instance, you want to unbundle your product, something that Facebook did a good year ago, I think it was April 2014, when the Messenger feature was unbundled, broken out of the main Facebook app and promoted to an app, a product in its own right. So that's a neat way to facilitate the growth of your product without having a monster product that increases, that requires an ever-increasing amount of teams to build it. But again, it may require some architecture refactoring to get there, to have then two products that are loosely coupled, the old product minus a major feature and the feature that has been turned into a new product.
Thank you for that great answer. This was the end of my questions, Roman. Thank you very much for your time, for being with us. And also, we would like to have you in Istanbul personally in the near future. Would you like to say something lastly?
Yeah, it was really nice. So thank you very much for inviting me and having me for the conversation. And it would be certainly nice to come to Istanbul, and we'll see what my schedule says.
Yeah, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the episode 11 of Agile Leaders. We would like, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Roman Pichler, and we would like to see you next month on the next episode. Have a nice evening.
Bye.